Well, hello and welcome to this week's broadcast. I am Anne La Follette and I'm a service pattern designer, an online educator, and I also do a little bit of mastermind coaching. And we are in the middle of a mini series called From Vision to Execution. So if you are jumping in right now, I am going to be covering step number 2 in my 5-step process. If you'd like to catch up, all you need to do is watch the YouTube video from 2 weeks ago that's called From Vision to Execution that gives you an overview of the whole process. And then last week's video, we covered the first step, which is called the vision thing. In this broadcast, we are going to jump into step number 2, which I call the parts and pieces. Now, to give you a little bit of an overview, I talk about the parts and pieces, but sometimes people like to refer to this either as your annual plan, if you're actually looking at an entire year. It could be a shorter time frame for you to establish goals against, or it could be what some people like to call your big rocks. And what that means is these need to be tied back to your vision. So if you missed last week's broadcast, go back to the vision thing and watch that to catch up. But essentially, you want to think about 3 very, very big goals, 3 very important things that are going to help you move your business forward. And so you can think about them as goals or as big rocks or as part of your annual plan. Now, I had a long corporate career, and for those of you who've been around here for a while, you've heard this story, but if you're newer here, I had a 25-year corporate career in retail. I worked for Esprit and The Gap and Old Navy. My last 15 years in that business was at Old Navy. I'm sure you've all been in Old Navy stores, and I thought I would retire from that retail job. But I got called into my boss's office and he eliminated my job. He said, "We're getting rid of your job, go talk to human resources." And all of a sudden, in my late 50s, I had to completely reinvent myself. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. You can learn more about it by going to my website, annelafolletteart.com, and just click on the About page, and there's a little video that tells you more about that story. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because I learned a ton in that corporate environment, and a lot of it has come in very, very handy. And I use a lot of the tools and the techniques that were effective in the corporate environment in my new online business. And I like to share those with you and bring them into the creative community, because they can be very, very helpful in terms of our thought process and some of the more sort of tactical things we need to do to be successful online or to be successful in our creative careers, or both. So one of the frameworks that I used a lot in my corporate career was called SMART goals. And SMART, S-M-A-R-T, each one of those letters stands for something. So S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A stands for achievable, R stands for relevant, and T stands for time-bound. And the reason that those are actually a very helpful framework for you to use as you figure out what you want your big 3 goals to be in this part of the process is because you don't want them to be too vague. You really want them to have time against them, right? So that you can then get even to a lower level of detail, which we will do next week in step number 3. And just having that framework will help you make sure that they're not too vague, that you'll actually be able to measure against them, which is the M, and that they also are relevant to the work that you've already done in your vision. Now let's dive into an example, because I think it's always easier to kind of process this information and make it real for yourself if we use an example. So when I was making the transition from a corporate career to having an online business and being an online entrepreneur, creative entrepreneur, I had 3 big goals in my first year. And the first was to get my website up and running. The second was to build my email list. And the third was to create weekly content that I could share with my creative community. Now, those sound great, but if you think about it for a second, they're big and they're still kind of vague. They don't go to sort of that next level of detail in terms of adding either time around them or some more specificity. They were totally relevant to my vision of becoming a service pattern designer and having online courses and being a coach. But the way I just described them, they were still pretty vague, not very specific, and they didn't have any time around them. There weren't any deadlines associated with them or time frames associated with them. So let me break them down a little bit further so you can see the difference between what I just talked about and what a much more smart set of goals look like. So getting my website up and running was goal number 1. So there's quite a lot involved in that, right? So the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out, well, what do I want my URL to be? And I got to go buy it, right? So that's more specific. In addition, you have to decide, well, what is the website hosting program that I'm going to, or platform that I am going to actually put my website on? You have to figure out, take a look at what is available out there and then pick one. So I ended up picking Squarespace, but that's another very specific action item below getting my website up and running. Then the third one, part of that process is that picking a template. So many website hosting services have different templates, which are very easy for you to then plug and play your copy and your images and anything that you want to use that will make it look like your own. But you have to figure that out, and then you actually have to upload your copy and your content and your imagery and your logo and any other branding elements that you want to include in your website. And then finally, you have to set a deadline for, well, how long am I going to spend on creating this website? When am I actually going to have as a deadline? Or what am I going to set as a deadline for when I want it to be up and running? Because we can all spend way too much time on our website, and it's more important to get it up and running and then continue to tweak it than to always say, oh no, it'll be ready next month or the month after or the month after. So that gives you a little bit more context around and specificity and some very specific measurable actions that are required to get a website up and running. Let's move to the second goal. My second goal was that I wanted to start to build my email list. So that meant I have to pick an email service provider. I ended up picking MailChimp because it was free, and it's free for a certain period of time until you get to a certain number of subscribers, so that's great. I then needed to learn how to use MailChimp, right? So I needed to watch some of their training videos and also read their blog so that I understood how to use it. I then needed to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to attract people onto my email list? I need to figure out how to have a freebie, or what's also sometimes called a lead magnet. And MailChimp has templates for you to use, so I had to figure that out. I then needed to figure out, well, how am I going to make sure that I get an actual link for that freebie that I can put on my website, and I need to put it on my website so people can actually find it. And then I wanted to ensure that I had a deadline for when I was going to do those pieces so that my website would come up first, and then my email service provider would be ready to go with the link, and I could then upload that link onto the website. So there had to be a date that would make this very time-bound. So those are some additional levels of specifics underneath starting to build your email list. The final piece was weekly content that I want to provide, so that I'm providing value every single week to the members of my creative community who have given me their email list, which is a really big deal. And I don't take that lightly. So underneath that goal was, well, do I want to blog? Do I want to do a video show? Or do I want to actually have a podcast? And so I actually started out blogging. Now, you're obviously watching a YouTube video, but in the beginning, I was blogging every single week. So I had to figure out, well, that's the decision I've made. Then I had to pick, well, what day of the week am I going to be providing this content so that I'm consistent? And so I picked Wednesdays. Then I had to figure out, well, what am I going to write about? And then I had to write and edit and upload that blog for the first time onto my website and send an email to my list saying, hey, my blog's now available. And what type of a deadline did I set? Or do you want to set for yourself to get that done? So those are my 3 goals, and they were initially at the very high level, and then I made them smart by going to the next level of detail about what was going to be required to actually achieve those goals. So I hope using that as an example is helpful for you as you now decide, well, what are your big 3 goals and how do you break them down and make them super smart? So if you're in my creative community and you're inside Anne's Art Club, which is our private Facebook group, I have created a post. This is what it looks like. So if you're in that group or you'd like to join that group, you can go to Facebook and you can find Anne's Art Club by just putting it into the search bar. Ask to join and I will let you in because it's a free but private group. And then look for this post and post your big 3 goals underneath it so that you can complete step 2 in this 5-step process. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. Please click the little button that is the subscribe button below, as well as the bell, so that you're notified whenever I have a new broadcast. And I always like to say in closing that I am Anne La Follette, and it's never too late to create. Bye for now, and I'll see you next week.